It's been a while since I've done some response videos to popular YouTube atheists, but as soon as I saw Drew of Genetically Modified Skeptic's recent video, I knew that it wasn't even an option. I had no choice but to respond to this one. Now, you may recall me responding to another video of his in which I argued that Drew didn't really understand the arguments that he was objecting to and how his misunderstandings led him to accuse Frank Turek of being dishonest. Now, of course, that was unfortunate, but his past videos are now in the past and we all make mistakes and get some things wrong from time to time, so maybe he was rushed or something like that. But in today's video and the upcoming videos in this short series, we'll see if Drew has stepped up his game and will prove his claims that
I've become pretty familiar with the popular arguments for God's existence, both because my theist viewers send them to me literally every day in comments and emails, all that. Thanks, guys. And because it's important to me to seek truth in studying arguments contrary to my position.
Now, the good thing about his video is that he's using arguments that can be found in literally any philosophy of religion textbook on the planet and are also taught in any introductory philosophy of religion class or course available today. So now notice that we aren't talking about my opinion here or Drew's opinions, but instead, this makes it easy for us to verify if Drew's objectively right or wrong in his presenting of at least the very basics of the arguments that he confidently asserts are all problematic.
Although I've found all arguments for God I've encountered so far to be logically or evidentially problematic in some way.
Now, I'm not expecting for him to be right on every detail or even for his objections to be valid. I'm setting the bar pretty low on this one. I'm only expecting that he understands the literal basics of the arguments that he's ranking, since he said that he's pretty familiar with them all, he sees them every day, and even takes the time to study them because truth is that important to him. So now the good news is, anyone watching this video who cares about truth can verify the accuracy of both his claims and mine and see who's correct by reading or even Googling any professionally published work on these arguments. So with that being said, this video is going to be the first of a few, each dealing with his evaluation of each argument. So hang tight. So I think we're going to be in for a good one. In this video, we'll be watching the intro as well as discussing his evaluation of Pascal's wager. But enough of all this setup already. Meme team, are you guys ready? Then let's go!
So, you're trying to convince someone that God exists. You're probably overwhelmed with the amount of information and approaches other theists recommend. You need a starting point. As an atheist myself, I've become pretty familiar with the popular arguments for God's existence, both because my theist viewers send them to me literally every day in comments and emails, all that. Thanks, guys. And because it's important to me to seek truth in studying arguments contrary to my position. That's why I've decided to create a guide that will illustrate and rank the power of each of the more popular arguments for God's existence. Although I've found all arguments for God I've encountered so far to be logically or evidentially problematic in some way, I do see some arguments as better than others. Here I'll rank popular arguments by their stats in 4 areas. 1. Intuitiveness, the ease at which the mind comprehends or even instinctively believes the concepts at play. 2. Fallacy aversion, the extent to which an argument avoids utilizing logical fallacies and or hides them well within its premises. 3. Communicability, the ease at which the argument is communicated to others and or its ability to capture attention when communicated. Finally, 4. Refutation resistance, the extent to which an argument presents a challenge to refute, whether by means of complexity, emotiveness, or high-level rhetoric. I'll briefly cover 6 arguments, 1 in each tier. For those unfamiliar with this tier system, F tier is least powerful while S tier is most. There's obviously a lot of subjectivity at play here, so feel free to create and explain your own ranking in the comments. In F tier, we have quite possibly the most popular argument on this list, at least when it comes to my comment section, Pascal's wager. The argument goes, if someone believes in God and God doesn't exist, a person suffers only a finite loss in death. But if he does exist, they enjoy an infinite gain in heaven. Meanwhile, if a person does not believe in God or act as if God exists, they stand to gain finite luxuries on earth, but stand to suffer infinitely in hell. Therefore, a rational person would seek to believe in God and live as if he exists. This is commonly put as a theist proclaiming to an atheist, if I'm wrong, I lose nothing, but if you're wrong, you lose everything.
And stop. This is going to be quick. So Drew starts his video that's dedicated to evaluating the arguments for God's existence with Pascal's wager. So what's ironic about this is that the first argument for God's existence that he gives us isn't even an argument for God's existence. It's about the belief in God, not God's existence.
This argument commits a black and white fallacy, asserting that only two alternative states exist as possibilities, while other possibilities in fact exist. This argument can be easily destroyed by pointing out that multiple mutually exclusive religions could use this argument, thereby making its nature absurd. This argument is remarkably communicable. Its simplicity, ease of comprehension, and emotiveness have literally seen it turned into a bumper sticker. That simplicity is its downfall, however, as its fallacies are so blatant and its refutation resistance is so low that it can be and has been refuted by the likes of Homer Simpson.
And what if we pick the wrong religion? Every week we're just making God madder and madder.
Testify!
With no special abilities and wildly unbalanced stats, Pascal's wager lands squarely in F tier despite its popularity.
Now, I will say that he does make a decent point when he talks about there being different views that are mutually exclusive, even though both me and Pascal himself would disagree that all views are equal. Pascal also argued extensively for the resurrection of Jesus, so more than likely Pascal would have given the reasons for why he chose to dichotomize between Christianity and atheism. But unfortunately, Pascal's wager was part of a larger unfinished work that was cut short by Pascal's unfortunate and untimely death. But even granting that Drew is right about that point for argument's sake, it still doesn't really help him very much because, as we mentioned a moment ago, Pascal's wager isn't attempting to prove God's existence. It's about belief in God, not the existence of God. Pascal wasn't making an argument to prove that God exists, but instead he was trying to motivate the people of his day who didn't care if God existed or not, and tried to give them a reason not to be apathetic towards the question of God's existence. So the wager was never meant or intended to argue that God does indeed exist. Now, perhaps this book puts it better than I can. It says, Pascal's wager was a revolutionary apologetic device. It is not an argument for the claim that God exists. That sort of argument appeals to evidence, whether empirical or conceptual. The wager is an argument that belief in God is pragmatically rational. So because Pascal's wager was never used or intended to be used to show someone that God exists, Drew's ranking of it is just irrelevant since his video is supposed to be dedicated to evaluating the arguments for God's existence. So we're off to a bad start. But let's be charitable here. It is possible that Drew just didn't see a relevant distinction between an argument that has God in it with an argument for God's existence, and that's certainly understandable. So we can grant that this first one was a fluke, and if it was, then you can bet your last 20 that he'll understand the basics of the next argument. And by basics here, I mean the literal basics of the argument. I mean things so basic that anyone reading literally anything published on the argument would immediately understand. There's just no way that he can get those kinds of basics wrong, is there? Well, let's find out. Subscribe so that way you don't miss anything, and if you're already in the playlist, hang tight, and if you're not, click the playlist on the bottom of the screen and it will take you there. And the next time that Drew thinks that Pascal's wager is an argument to show the existence of God, what are you gonna say? My goodness, I mean, what do you mean?